Do you own a seven-figure practice? You've probably heard me talk a lot about the Seven Figure Practice Club recently. This is a new, amazing program where we are getting together seven-figure practice owners together in a small group of 12 to work together for a year. There's so many things that seven-figure practice owners deal with that they don't have a community to ask questions, learn, and grow from. If you want to apply to be in the Seven Figure Practice Club, head on over to practiceofthepractice.com/club. There, you're going to be able to read all about what the program entails. We're going to be covering all sorts of things in our monthly meetings. We're meeting twice a month. The first meeting is 90 minutes, and we're going to have three 25-minute hot seats for you to dig in and to get questions answered and also to help other seven-figure practice owners. The second meeting of the month is going to be one of our practice owners presenting on something they are knocking out of the park. And it's a chance to really be able to learn, teach, grow from each other in a way that you really don't find anywhere else in the marketplace. Also, in-person meetings are so important. And that's why twice a year, we're going to connect, once here in Traverse City, Michigan, and then another time somewhere else, yet to be determined. And we're going to connect, we're going to hang out, we're going to talk private practice, but we're also going to have a lot of fun. So if you want to apply for the Seven Figure Practice Club, head on over to practiceofthepractice.com/club and fill out your application today. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 940. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast. I hope you are doing amazing today. We are wrapping up the year with our series on seven-figure practices. So as you know, since, it was December 6th, we had our first one. We've had a ton of different interviews we've done, things on, how to add 10 people in 1 month, how to make early decisions that make a huge impact, how to have a 6,000 square foot wellness space on 40 acres of land, how to maximize profit, all sorts of really amazing things. And today we're going to be talking all about EOS as well. But before we get into that, if you are a seven-figure practice owner, the applications for our seven-figure practice club have opened up. And so if you haven't heard about that yet, what that is it's our 1-year program aimed at people that are seven-figure practices. So you have to be over $1 million in what you're bringing in. And we are going to meet twice a month. So we're going to meet for 90 minutes at the beginning of the month, and we're going to have three 25-minute hot seats. Then we're going to have a 60-minute training by one of our seven-figure practice owners on something you're just rocking it out so that we can co-learn from each other. We're also going to twice meet for 2 days. So once here in Traverse City in April, and then another time somewhere probably warm and fun that we all decide on. So it's going to be an amazing group. You can apply for that over at practiceofthepractice.com/club. You also get access to all of our membership communities, all of our content, all of that is included in that as well. So if you're interested in that and you're a seven-figure practice owner, that's over at practiceofthepractice.com/club. So really excited today. We have Valerie Harris back on the Practice of the Practice podcast. I believe this is her third or fourth time on the show. And so if you haven't heard of her before, I just want to welcome you right now, Valerie, to the Practice of the Practice podcast. So glad that you're here today.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be back again.
Yeah, well, I don't have the bio in front of me because I've had you on so much, but I haven't memorized it. Tell us a little bit about your practice and all the different things that you're up to these days.
So I have a practice of anywhere between 12 to 20 clinicians, and that'll come up as we talk. Built solely as a teaching practice. So we really focus our mission on and our model of care on being a collaborative practice that is teaching as we go. So the majority of our clinicians are all new clinicians, probably like 98% of them have either come to us as an intern or they were just newly licensed or they just graduated. So kind of a unique scaling of our practice. And then I also do Educate and Elevate, which is a mastermind group on the side to teach other practice owners how to scale teaching practices.
Oh, that's so awesome. I know that when you first started presenting at Killing It Camp a number of years ago, your discussion on the teaching practice really resonated with people. So to watch you go from kind of just sharing what you were doing to now having that mastermind, that's really amazing. Well, let's go back to the beginning. What did your solo practice look like, and what did you do at the beginning that really helped position you for a seven-figure practice?
Well, I would say what I did in my solo practice is I saw a lot of clients. And I would say it's probably not well recommended by, most. However, what I've learned is that there are a lot of solo practice owners out there doing just that. So I do tend to think there's a certain group of us who have that capacity, who can do it, but we also know we can't do that for life. And I think we run at private practice in such a way that we don't pace it and we just go all in. And then we realize, oh my gosh, I don't know how I'm going to sustain this. I have so many clients and they just keep coming. And I feel like that was the natural pivot point for me to bring in an intern, was because I started to feel limited in the impact that I was having in private practice. Because although I was seeing a lot of clients, I was realizing there was a lot of trauma, and they were staying a lot longer than expected, and it was just limiting like the large scale impact. And so I really think that having that many clients in a lot of ways helped me transition to group much quicker, and especially with interns, because I was able to get them observation hours with my clients.
Mm. So, as has happened with most of the seven-figure practice owners I've talked to, they kind of talk about how there's maybe initial growth in your solo practice and then some plateau, and then some growth in the group practice and then plateau, and then growth into the seven-figure practice and plateau. When you think about the growth as a group practice, what did that look like? And then did things plateau? And if they didn't, then why? And if they did, what do you think happened?
So I do think there comes a point where you plateau it around the 1 million mark. I definitely feel like when we hit a million, it slows way down after that. Um, I think part of that, though, is because of our intentionality around stabilizing, which we can talk about more. But prior to that, I will say that it probably did get a little bit stagnant between the 6 to 10 clinician mark. And I hear that's pretty common. And it's because when you pivot from the 0 to 5, you really already have a lot of systems in place. And so aside from just getting office space and maybe more robust email with, workspace and maybe a more robust phone service, you have a lot of things that can pretty much kind of just take on an additional couple clinicians. And so it tends to be an easier pivot. But once you get over that, you tend to need more systems. You tend to need processes documented. They can't all be in your head anymore. And I will say we didn't stop at that point and do those things. So I think the stagnation that we experienced was stagnant because I think our clinicians were struggling with capacity, because I had created a system where I was like, well, I just figured it out as I went. So I'm just going to give them lots of resources, tell them what I do, and then let them figure out what works for them. What I failed to realize is there's a reason they're not running the practice, and it's probably because they don't want to figure it out. They want someone to show them, have it written down, do it for them, do it with them. And so, because I was still seeing clients at that point, I think that we were growing financially. We didn't really hit a plateau necessarily financially until after the million mark, but I think clinically we reached a plateau, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Now, I know one thing we started talking about before we started recording was the implementation of EOS, and I would love to have that be kind of the bulk of our interview today. First, can you just talk a little bit about EOS? I know you're not an EOS expert, but I'm sure that in onboarding and doing the EOS approach, could you just talk about what it is, and then I'd love to dig into what that looks like in your practice.
Yeah, absolutely. So I tell our clinicians and basically anyone that asks that's in the therapy space that much like we have evidence-based practices for our clients that we want to adhere to or that we, are widely recommended, we also have evidence-based business practices, and EOS is one of them. Um, and it is a way to get everyone on the same page, moving in the same direction towards the same vision. And it's to make sure that all of the things that you're putting into place in your practice can be backed up with metrics, just like you would want to baseline somebody and their symptoms when they come into treatment, apply certain interventions, and then re retest that to see, if the interventions are working. It's a very similar concept, that you could look at it in that way. It's just for businesses that are between, I think, what is it, 5 employees, and I think it caps out at 100 employees.
Mm. Yeah, I know that for us, when we met with our EOS advisor or implementer, it was really helpful to just start to think through what are the numbers for each seat, and that one person might sit in multiple seats, but to really kind of say, like, what is this job doing? How do we judge success? How do we judge when
Mhm.
improvement needs to be made? And I think that thinking through that as the business owner, really makes you kind of say, like, what are we doing here? So when you first kind of started EOS, what were some of those numbers that you thought through, and how did you assign them to specific chairs within your organization?
Yeah, sure. I'll also tell you about the experience of when you start to track them and what they look like, because it can be an overwhelming one. So, one of the things that we track as far as with our clinicians, we track things like, are they seeing the agreed upon amount of clients a week? And if they're full time, they're being paid at a full time rate. They're getting trained to be full time. They're getting full time resources, which could include, consulting groups, supervision, that all these investments are going into them. And yet we had several that were not meeting those numbers. And so what quickly became apparent is that we had 3 to 4 clinicians in our practice who were carrying the weight of the budget. And it shouldn't have been that way. And so that's where, if you don't track things, it's real easy when you're not measuring those things start to not matter. And so just by merely tracking those, we now have almost everybody on board. I think we have one that's not just yet and is just returning from a leave. And so that's kind of expected right after a leave. But everyone else is on track or they have left our company. And that's one of those hard truths with EOS, is that it causes you to get so clear on things and where you're going that people self-select to leave, or they're held accountable and they're told to leave.
Mm,
So one of those big ones being numbers of clients that you're seeing. And this can be really difficult for clinicians to understand, because oftentimes when they come into group practice, they really feel like they should get to choose how many clients they're seeing. And they often forget that this is any other business, it's still a business. And so having to language that in several different ways to really help them understand why it matters was quite a challenge for us.
mm,
Looking at retention rates. So, if clients are coming, how long are they staying? Is there something we can be tracking with that? What we noticed is that if we have clinicians who cancel on clients, those clients tend to cancel a lot more on the clinician. If we have clinicians who are super flexible because they're trying to meet their numbers, but they're just overly flexible with scheduling. We tend to find clients that don't prioritize their schedule. So we've had to do coaching and give them scripts on things like that, and encourage them to have 2 sessions scheduled out at a time to make sure that the clients understand that those spots aren't guaranteed and that they're expected to show up to them. One of the most astounding numbers for the practice that we found, which was my number as the clinical director, um, overall, was our show rates overall. So each clinician has a show rate, and then the overall practice show rate. We treat veteran clients, a significant amount of veteran clients, and then we also have, of course, non-veteran clients. We had a 6% increase in our no-show rate between veteran clients and non-veteran clients. And so
Mm.
that was a problem we had to solve. And it didn't start with us. It started with the VA, because the VA has conditioned them to engage services when it's convenient, when they remember. And so we have to really just kind of like retrain them on engagement with our services. And so we've had to implement attendance policies around that. And I'm happy to report that we have dropped that to 3% from the 6 since March of this year.
Wow. Please don't DIY your accounting. It's like relying on a self help book instead of getting much needed therapy. There's a reason accountants go through tons of schooling and grueling exams like we do. You shouldn't be expected to know all the things that they studied for years. They're experts and can make the whole quarterly tax situation smooth, and honestly, with some planning, pretty painless. You don't want to be surprised by taxes or have the IRS breathing down your neck. And therapists ask me all the time where to find an accountant. Herd is my go to referral for therapists needing bookkeeping, tax preparation, payroll, and all the financial back office stuff. They even help therapists set up a bank account, form a business entity, and open a retirement plan. They work exclusively with therapists and cost way less than the accountant I worked with for years. The deadline to sign up for 2023 tax services with Herd is December 31st, 2023. You can schedule a free consultation at joinherd.com/Joe. That's joinheard.com/Joe, and get your first month totally free with promo code Joe at checkout. Again, that's joinherd.com/Joe. Now, I want to go back to people leaving because I think
Mm-hmm.
a lot of therapists and therapist owners, they go into counseling because they have a big heart for it or whatever the emotional reason is, and they feel like if they have to fire someone or let someone go, oftentimes emotionally that's really difficult for them. For
Mm-hmm.
you, what either had to shift for you? What was helpful in thinking through that when people were saying, self-selecting, saying this isn't a fit for me where we're headed, and what about when you had to let people go? Because I imagine that sometimes when especially people self-select out, especially if they've been there for a long time, it can feel like, oh my gosh, like, am I screwing up? Or there's maybe some second guessing. Tell me about that emotional side of kind of how you had to grow up as a business owner through that process of getting people to self-select out or even letting people go.
Yeah. So I had seen this video, and I don't know where it's at now, but I'm sure I can get it for you. It was shared with me, and it was this woman, and I think she's talking about parenting, but she was talking to leaders about parenting. Um or using a parenting story, and she talked about how she had this kid who kept asking all these questions constantly, and she had already given a clear set of directives to all her kids. I mean, she had like 6 kids, 7 kids, 7 kids or something. She had given them clear directives, and she had this one that was just nitpicking everything, like, but if we're going to go out tomorrow, like, what are we eating for lunch? Like, I don't know if I want to go because I don't know what's for lunch. And she's like, what? Like, so she would answer the question, then she'd answer the question. And then it finally got to that next day, and she had told everyone to be ready in the boat. And she said it dawned on her that 6 of the 7 were in the boat ready to go, and they were out there sweating and suffering because she was spending all her time with the one who was asking all the questions and had never fully committed to the process. And she said that was bad leadership on my part, and that hit me like a ton of bricks. I realized that by trying and working so hard to keep certain people who really were not aligned with our practice or were no longer aligned, it was really going to be causing pain to those who were. And I mean, it had to do with I started a practice with the rainbow sunglasses like everybody else, rose colored glasses, thinking that I if you just treat everybody well enough, they'll stay forever or they'll stay a long time. And I now know that that was not me choosing people based on whether they were value aligned with our practice and whether they were in line with our mission. And so what it resulted in is a lot of bad hires. And so I did feel a lot of guilt for that. And I think I always wanted to know that I gave them the opportunity to get on board. And so there was this tension between those who were on board and being, feeling the pain of those who weren't, and me having to state, okay, but until we have these things documented, until we know that everyone is trained in all of these things and they've all been given the same opportunities, it's hard to hold them accountable. And they're over here going, well, we didn't have all those things and we're accountable. And I'm like, okay, that's fair too. So it did come down to what is the quickest way we can find out who's value aligned and who is an ideal team player. And so we gave out values assessments, we gave out employee and engagement assessments, and we started getting some anonymous feedback and got really clear and had a good idea of who it was coming from, just because the theme was very consistent. And I mean, I will say that when they self select, it feels like a win, although it does still feel painful. We did have one that was with us from the beginning that self selected out. And it did feel painful because it was just weird to imagine going forward without this person as part of the team. But at the same time, it actually felt good knowing that we had created so much clarity that this person felt safe enough to come forward and say, this doesn't align anymore. And
Mhm.
that's the goal. And so, what wasn't the goal was to have to let some go because they said they were aligned, but they weren't. And so it is hard, but I think you have to look at all the pain that it's going to inflict on your business, on your clients, on basically, I'll always say, am I leaving people in the boat? Are there people out there ready to go in the boat? And I'm spending more time in here when I need to tend to the ones that are already in the boat.
Mhm. The previous president of the community college here where I worked, he would say, "If you're not at the table, you're on the menu." And it was kind of his way of being like, "Speak up, be a part of it. Otherwise, like, not that you're on the chopping block, but if you're not at the table and on board, then get out." Which it can feel harsh at times, but also,
Yeah.
when I've let people stay at practice of the practice too long and they've self-selected out, oftentimes the relief that comes afterwards, and also the freedom of other people to say, yeah, this was what was going on behind the scenes, is then an opportunity for me to say, like, why didn't I create an environment where those concerns could have been brought to light to
Oh my
me
gosh.
other than when
Yes.
this person leaves? It's like, shoot, like, I want to know these things, but it's like, we do our best, but then oftentimes, when someone leaves, especially if it's a little more difficult, it's a lot easier to then kind of deconstruct it with the team because they're more open and you can see areas that you as a leader can grow too. Now, you had mentioned a whole bunch of metrics like, percentages in regards to no show rate, um, individuals, how much they're scheduling. And that seems like a lot of data to be collecting. How are you collecting that? Who's collecting it? Is it all in your EHR? Like, are you creating different ways to do it outside of your EHR? Tell me about the numbers side of monitoring all those different things that are working or not working.
Yeah. So I had an implementer of sorts. I went through Katie May and Shailene Kite's Stabilize and Scale program. It was tremendous. It was exactly what I needed to get really clear. And so, a lot of things they helped me develop those scorecards with the specificity that we needed. Um, do assessments of all the different parts of our practice from top to bottom. And for instance, one of the things that I realized, and I would be willing to bet any practice owner out there would fall into one of these two buckets. I focused so much on marketing and on budgets and numbers because I knew in my past I had not done good with numbers. And so I had a challenge before me to master numbers in terms of budgeting. I had that down. So, like, I aced that part of the quiz, but our clinical operations was a hot mess. And the client journey was a hot mess. A lot of the people in our cohort, theirs was the opposite, where the budgeting was terrifying. They had not looked at their numbers, but they were really clear on clinical operations and client journey. So, one of the things that EOS is really good about is it will get you really clear real quick on where the focus needs to be. And then we use a program called 90.io, and it's made to run EOS. So we track metrics there. Our clinicians submit a Google form weekly at the end of the week with their numbers on it. And then I do those metrics. I put them into 90. We run our EOS, our meetings in 90, our one-to-one. We have our state of the company this Friday. So we do everything there, and it's a great software.
Mm. Yeah, so having that software so you're not starting from scratch.
Yes, but I will say for those who do stabilize and scale and have smaller resources to start, they do have a Google dashboard worked out with all of those same metrics and numbers. So that's another alternate way that people could track that in a more affordable way, because 90 does cost per person.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Hmm.
So when you think about the challenges of being a seven-figure practice owner, what are some of the big challenges right now?
I would say the biggest challenge is people understanding numbers in terms of why the numbers matter. It's really hard for people to see the long game. And so when people come into a practice and they know that it's a seven-figure practice, you have two types of people. You have some that are just really grateful and kind of anxious, and they really don't want to know about the numbers, and they trust you, and you still want to get their feedback on stuff, and you want to tell them about the numbers, and they're like, oh, the numbers make me twitchy, and you're like, yeah, but these are good, like you have to learn numbers. But then you have this other group of people, and they almost feel this entitlement of, well, you're making this, like, I want to know where that goes. And um well, we didn't get a vote on that. And so it's sort of
Mm.
like, you don't get to vote on your pay. Like, you don't get to vote on how many clients you see. It just is. Well, if we're raising rates, why are we raising rates, but you didn't raise our rate? Well, because the business has had a lot of increases in all the services it uses, and it's absorbed those for the past 2.5 years. So at some point, the only way to give back to clinicians is to raise the rate. Oh, well, it just doesn't make sense why our rate's not. So it's just the questions you get are very odd, because I'm like, I don't
Mm.
think people go to McDonald's, pay 25 cents more for the burger, and then want to contact the CEO to ask if everyone got paid more. Like, no one even thinks to do that. But in a group practice, you're constantly having to help them understand that this is not a private practice. And in a private practice, you get to determine these things. In a group practice, you are an employee of a business. And
Yeah.
that there's tension there, but at the same time, we use that to foster more communication. Like, do you trust us? Because to me, that's a trust issue. And if the
Mhm.
trust isn't there, is there more clarity that needs to be created? And sometimes it is. It's just a little more clarity, and the little clarity goes a long way. Other times, the clarity isn't enough, and there continue to be questions and pushback. And it really goes to show, oftentimes, when that happens, that it may just not be a good fit. And because you don't want to spend your time doing that when you have other things to be doing.
Yeah, yeah, that idea of justifying your business decisions for your business,
Right.
it's like, yeah, you're not getting, especially if you have a fixed rate, you're not getting a percent of what's coming in, and you are choosing to work at this counseling business, and not that you want to be like, well, then hit the door if you can't do it, but it's also like this is your business, and you that whole mindset of not understanding money, and not understanding what an owner draw is versus profit versus just you getting paid for the work you're doing. I mean, that goes over so many people's heads, and I think that's got to be challenging and frustrating at times. How do you not just get pissed off? I feel like that really a lot of people could just be like, screw you. How do you make sure that you don't just like burn the place down when people are having that level of maybe entitlement or whatever labels you would give
Oh
it?
man. Well, I will say there've been times where I've been told that I've gotten defensive. So I won't say that I've always done it well, especially in groups. When it's coming at you and it feels like you're on a firing squad, and you thought one meeting was going one way, and then all of a sudden one person speaks up and two or three find it find the need to then speak up too, and you don't see it coming. It can feel like a personal attack. So I will say that I've gotten a lot of leadership coaching. Shout out to my leadership coach, Michael Dietrich Chastain. He gets to hear a lot of it. And then I will cover my face sometimes and say, here's what I really wanted to say. And I'll cover my face, and he'll say, yes, cover your face. Don't you say
I
that.
love that you're
So,
working with Michael. He was one of my
yes,
first consulting clients. I remember when he was just getting that started. So that's awesome
yes.
you're working with him.
Yes, he has helped a lot. I've read every Patrick Lencioni book, some of them twice, and we also just foster like radical candor throughout the building. So that is something where the charts in front of every single employee, we have talks about it often. We talk about, hey, this is where I am if I don't say this to you. This is where I am if I say this to you. I need to be here. So I'm going to say something, and it may feel ugly and it might be hard to hear. However, this is where it's at. And I'm being clear and I want to be direct, but I also care deeply. I think radical candor has given me the segue and the bridge between the two where I can feel like I'm saying the things that I need to say in a way that feels value aligned, but also feels aligned for me in a personal way.
Mhm. Sometimes people can take radical candor to mean you get to just be straightforward and be a jerk. How do you frame it as to what radical candor is? Because, I know what it means kind of in the business terms, but people listening might not really know what that actually looks like. When you think about that, like, how is radical candor different than being straightforward or just being like mean or like how do you view that as a technique?
I would say that I would put it in a both and terminology. And because you want to say that you care deeply and you're challenging directly, but they need lots of examples of what that looks like. So I hear what you're saying, and I hear that this is concerning for you, and I care that it concerns you, and I really do want what's best for you. And I hope that you find that here, and here are the ways that we can help you get there. At the same time, these things won't change. And so, if this is a deal breaker for you, it may not be the best place for you long term. And I want you to make whatever choice is best for you. So
Thank you.
it's in that frame of just doing the both and. I'm going to be both validating and caring and honest.
Mhm. Valerie, the last question I always ask is if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
Oh, so many things. Um, about group practice in
However you
general?
want to answer it.
Okay. All right. Great. Love it. I would want those who are considering working for a group practice to understand that you will not be running a private practice. A group practice is not the place to go to figure out how to run your own private practice. Because at the end of the day, your values and your vision may look completely different from the place that you go to work. And so if you're really considering going into private practice, the better thing to do would be just go get lots of clinical experience in lots of different places and then get a consultant when you're ready to go into private practice. If you're in private practice looking to go into group practice, um, I would say to know that being a group practice owner can be a very, very lonely space, and it's often underappreciated, under rewarded. You can give, and be the only person at, a holiday event without a card or a thank you. It's a weird feeling, and it can feel personal at times. So I think the way to mitigate that is to absolutely have a good support system of other practice owners, because they are quite literally the only people on the planet that get your pain in the way that you experience it. And if you're someone working in a group practice, be nice to your group practice owner and understand that they have a tremendous amount of stress and they really are trying to do what's best long term. Um, and just ask questions with curiosity versus making assumptions, and it'll go a lot better with you.
Mm. And Valerie, if people want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I'm on Facebook. Educate and Elevate is a Facebook page. And then I'm also on in a group. We have the Educate and Elevate Facebook group as well. So either one of those would be the best way.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
Wow. So that is the end of this series for this year. We have 3 more next month that we're going to be hitting on. But after this, we have kicking off the very next one that we have coming out tomorrow is our kickoff to our new year, new habits. And we are going to be talking about 7 strategies for scaling up. Then we're going to be diving into growing multiple streams of income, launching courses on body image, OCD, and launching a podcast, hiring the best people. We have a ton of new year, new habits types of things coming up. So really excited about that. And we also then have a handful more of the 7-figure practice owners coming up in mid-January. So I hope your year is wrapping up well. If you are a 7-figure practice owner, some of the things Valerie said is that being an owner, it can be lonely, or, you're giving this radical candor. You're being clear with people, but then maybe you second guess yourself. If you want to be around other people that are 7-figure practice owners, I would love for you to apply to join the 7-figure practice club. You can apply now over at practiceofthepractice.com/club. We are going to be reviewing those applications throughout December and January and letting you know throughout. And it has all the details on what's included in that, the types of people that are going to be there, the types of things we'll be covering. We have those 2 live retreats as well as 2 meetings a month with other 7-figure practice owners. So I would love for you to apply for that if you're a 7-figure practice owner. Again, that's over at practiceofthepractice.com/club. And we could not do the show without our sponsors. Herd is my go-to referral for therapists needing bookkeeping, tax prep, payroll, all the financial back end things. They work exclusively with therapists, and the deadline to sign up for 2023 tax services with Herd is December 31st, 2023. That is just days away. You can schedule a free consultation at joinherd.com/Joe and get your first month for free with promo Joe at checkout. Again, that's joinherd, HEARD.com/Joe. Thank you so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.